Hello, everyone. Today, I'd like to talk to you about my experiences with disinformation over the past decade, what lessons I've drawn from dealing with disinformation, and how it can be applied in the future. First, a little about myself and where I come from. Back in 2011, I was a fairly ordinary person working an administrative job for a company in my hometown in Leicester, England. In my spare time, I used to spend a lot of time on the internet, in particular on internet forums discussing topics that interested me. I had a particular interest in international politics, and in 2011, the Arab Spring was a topic that was dominating the news. So from the start of 2011, I found myself engaged with discussions about events in Libya. These online discussions would eventually lead me to starting a blog, then launching Bellingcat, which has led the way into the development of online open source investigation. But this is also where I first encountered what I would come to call the counterfactual community, where no matter the evidence, they took the opposite side. They framed everything through their distrust of the West, taking pro-Gaddafi positions regardless of the situation or the evidence, and sharing fringe blogs and websites that supported their claims, which themselves were clearly motivated by a deep-rooted distrust of the West. Over the years, as I began blogging and eventually founded Bellingcat, I encountered the same sorts of communities time and time again. First with Syria, with communities denying war crimes, chemical attacks, and seeing the conflict through a conspiratorial lens. Next with the downing of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine in 2014. We've seen the rise of conspiracies like QAnon crossing over with Trumpism and other conspiracy theories. With the COVID pandemic, we saw new conspiracy theories emerging about the origins of both the virus and the vaccine. Bellingcat has worked on these issues over the past 8 years, so we've spent a lot of time dealing with these communities. And this has provided us with a certain amount of insight about how and why these counterfactual communities form around different topics, and provide some lessons for how we can deal with the production and spread of disinformation. Often when disinformation is discussed, it's in terms of what outside actors, usually Russia, are doing to our social media communities, producing disinformation that is then repeated by online communities. This, I believe, is a fundamental misunderstanding of how disinformation is created and spreads in many cases. It is, in fact, the communities themselves that produce disinformation, and generally not because their goal is to produce disinformation, but to counter what they themselves see as disinformation produced by mainstream sources, which could include governments, the media, NGOs, and medical professionals. But why do these counterfactual communities form in the first place? Often they begin as communities that have been brought together around certain issues, which themselves are not necessarily conspiratorial or counterfactual in nature. For example, a number of the individuals who made up the community which denied chemical weapon attacks in Syria started as part of the Stop the War movement that arose around the 2003 invasion of Iraq. With some of the COVID conspiracy communities, you see people who began their journey as part of alternative health communities. What they have in common is a fundamental distrust in certain sources of authority, usually, rightly or wrongly, over some perceived betrayal. With a community that arose around the denial of chemical weapon use in Syria, it is frequently the 2003 invasion of Iraq and the Israel and Palestinian situation where they believe the government and media has betrayed their trust. With the alternative health community, you often encounter people who had a defining negative experience with medical professionals, such as a misdiagnosis or the loss of a loved one for reasons they blame on medical professionals. It should be stressed that these feelings of betrayal may not be misplaced and are often held by people who don't get drawn into conspiracy theories, but I believe the crucial difference between those who are drawn into conspiracy theories and those who are not are how they view the world. They see the betrayals as something that defines themselves. The internet era created more opportunities for people with similar ideas to come together, and the social media era increased the accessibility to those ideas. It could even be said that the social media era quickly transformed into the era of the algorithm, when an individual is proactively served content search engines and social media companies believe their users want to see, content that builds on the content they've already seen, reinforcing their beliefs and fueling alternative media ecosystems. If you have doubts about chemical weapons attacks in Syria, the fate of Malaysian Airlines Flight 15, questions about Q, or concerns about vaccines, there's a Facebook group, YouTube personality, and social media superstar that can tell you what the algorithm has decided you want to know. These form alternative media ecosystems that draw people into ideas outside of the mainstream, and proudly so. Now, not every person who has doubts about vaccine safety logs on and becomes a true believer in Bill Gates' plan to put microchips into everyone via mass vaccination, nor will they generally find themselves leaping straight into that sort of content after their first Google search. What happens is more of a filtering effect. You might go from watching videos about medical concerns about vaccines to videos claiming vaccines inadvertently make you sick, to videos that claim vaccines are a big con from Big Pharma, to videos that claim vaccines are designed to make you sick, to videos that claim Bill Gates is putting microchips in vaccines. Not everyone will make that journey, but those who do will be true believers, finding like-minded individuals and alternative media ecosystems that arise around those beliefs. This model of behavior can be observed time and time again on a variety of topics, and there's often an overlap between communities. We saw with COVID-19 that the media ecosystems that focused on the denial of war crimes in Syria started to promote ideas around vaccine skepticism, if not outright conspiracy theories. Personalities from those separate alternative media ecosystems started crossing over, appearing on podcasts, YouTube videos, writing articles that appear in the other alternative media ecosystems. The Venn diagram of these separate communities started being drawn together, with websites, blogs, and social media stars of the separate alternative media ecosystems being the centers of gravity that draws the circles together. And through all of this, it's very important to remember that many of the people who participate in these communities are not grifters, nor do they consider themselves to be agents of disinformation, but they see themselves as truth seekers, fighting against the mainstream orthodoxy. But that's not to say that these communities are free from state-level involvement. In our work at Bellingcat, we've uncovered state involvement in supposedly organic communities that go beyond troll factories and bot networks. The downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 brought together a community that rejected the claims that Russia or Russian-backed separatists were involved with shooting down MH17, and instead placed blame on the Ukrainians. As with so many of these counterfactual communities, they didn't attempt to build a coherent narrative backed by evidence around what happened, but instead focused on attacking allegations against Russia and producing piecemeal claims supported by supposed evidence that generally fell apart after any serious examination. While the Russian government made various claims around the downing of MH17, often self-contradictory in nature, it was this community that was often proactive in promoting counterclaims about what happened to MH17. But what should we do about disinformation? I think it's important to have a multifaceted approach, with organic engagement with online communities being key. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 can be seen as a great example of what's possible. First, I should say that the situation in Ukraine is rather unique, because since 2014 there's been an engaged online community made of individuals from a wide variety of backgrounds, including journalists, activists, human rights workers, disinformation researchers, and ordinary people following events in Ukraine. With MH17, Ukraine became one of the first conflicts where open source investigation played a key role in not only identifying those responsible for shooting down MH17, but also led to a community involvement in that investigation process and the identification of further Russian involvement in the 2014 conflict. This meant that there was already a community engaged with the situation in Ukraine, which had an understanding of disinformation and open source investigation. In the weeks prior to the invasion, parts of that community, as well as people who were newly engaged with the information from Ukraine, began to document the Russian buildup along the border with Ukraine, with Russian TikTok users helpfully documenting the movement of Russian troops and equipment into positions along the border. While Russia claimed the buildup was related to training exercises, it was clear from the type of units and vehicles being transported to the border that this was not the typical military buildup you'd expect to see around training exercises. As the day of the invasion approached, allegations of Ukrainian violations and crimes started to be shared on pro-Russian channels. The evidence that came with these allegations were quickly examined and picked apart by the social media community that had formed around the build-up of the invasion, and often in less than an hour of originally being published, had been debunked. In one example, a claim that Polish saboteurs acting for the Ukrainians had attacked chlorine storage at a water treatment plant was systematically debunked. The claim originated from Russian-backed separatist channels, with a supporting video that in reality showed very little beyond grainy footage of a pair of soldiers shooting into some trees. The video was shared on Telegram, and unfortunately for the people sharing it, they were unaware that unlike social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook, the metadata of the original file is not stripped when it's shared on Telegram, so the community started examining the video metadata that included detailed Adobe metadata information. This included details of two files that had been edited together, both created before the incident occurred. One of the files had a file name that was identical to a YouTube video title showing Finnish soldiers practicing at a firing range. Social media users with audio engineering experience identified an explosion in the Finnish video that had an identical waveform to the explosion in the video shared by Russian-backed separatists, even demonstrating where the audio in the separatist video cut off just before Finnish soldiers cheered their colleagues' shot. This video was thoroughly debunked in less than an hour, and the community continued to find more issues with it over the following days, keeping the conversation around the fake video going and highlighting the willingness of the Russian-backed separatists to fake content for propaganda purposes. Not only that, but it also limited the impact of the video among people who supported the Russian side, as they had no interest in promoting already debunked content. Along with debunking fakes and calling out disinformation, Bellingcat has also taken the work of individuals geolocating videos as part of an ad hoc social media community and fed that into a process to verify the geolocation of as many civilian harm videos as possible, creating a live data set of videos both publicly available at ukraine.bellingcat.com and providing directly to organizations working on human rights issues and accountability. Despite the best efforts of fact-checkers, Russian government officials and pro-Russian counterfactual communities still put out lies on a regular occasion with a straight face. What has helped undermine those efforts is a community reaction to the frustration caused by such relentless deception, in particular a group that calls themselves the North Atlantic Fellows Organization, shortened to NAFO. This is a community that uses memes mocking Russian propaganda to undermine their messaging, filling the information space around Russian disinformation attacks with humorous responses. Their style is reminiscent of mid-2000s forum culture that originated on sites like Something Awful and 4chan, and beyond annoying pro-Russian voices and disarming their attempts at disinformation, they've created a community spirit that has helped raise funds for Ukraine, including over 1.5 million through St. Javelin Clothing Company, which produces NAFO-themed merchandise and other meme-related clothing. It might seem that these diverse efforts that counter disinformation have arisen organically and rapidly, but the groundwork for the existence of these communities started back in 2014, in particular since the downing of MH17. It's my opinion that if we want a more sustainable and widespread approach to countering disinformation, we need to think in terms of building communities and empowering individuals to make a difference. I believe we need to show young people how they can make a positive contribution to issues they care about as part of online communities, teaching them critical thinking and investigative skills, and showing them how to build online communities designed to have impact. Bellingcat will soon be working with a UK-based organisation, the Student View, that teaches 16 to 18-year-olds how to investigate issues impacting their own lives. Our hope is that we can combine traditional investigation methods with open source methods and show them how to have an impact, and empowering them to make a change in their own lives. By doing that, we hope to prevent them becoming a new generation of angry, disenfranchised internet users who confuse online abuse with empowerment. But it's not an easy task. It requires a lot of effort, and Bellingcat is still a small organisation. So my hope is that all of us can be part of the efforts to make the online world a better, more productive place, because the opportunity is there, if only if we can work towards it together.